Thank you everyone for joining us for this, our sixth happy hour program. Before I let Karen Blair Brand, ESU board member, introduce our speakers today, I just wanted to take a moment to go over some technical considerations for today's meeting. We will have a question and answer session at the end, but it will be done via the chat and Q&A buttons at the bottom of your screen. So if you do have any questions, please put them in there, wherein I will then dictate them to Dr. Gandhi and Panna Naik. Without any further ado, I'll now introduce Karen Blair Brand. Karen, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Program 6 of the ESU Happy Hour series. I'm Karen Blair Brand. It's a beautiful day here in central Pennsylvania. I serve as chair of the Grassroots Happy Hour Committee, president of the Central Pennsylvania branch, Region 3 chair, and yes, on the national board. It's an honor to serve the ESU. Our Happy Hour Committee invites all ESU branches to serve and be part of our Happy Hour series. We'd like you to submit suggestions and any speakers that you might have. Maybe somebody from your membership of your ESU branch, somebody from your local community, or your local university. We'd like recommendations from the different branches so that we have some diversity of our programs. We welcome those and honor them. Also, you can send that information, whether it's a name or a program recommendation, to the link via the ESU website. There are happy hours being planned for October, November, and December for your enjoyment, and we will let you know what there's going to be as we roll them out. Remember that participation is free for members, friends, and guests of the ESU. And today it is a great honor for me to introduce Dr. Natwar Gandhi, who will discuss his 2019 book, Still the Promised Land, some excerpts from it about his story of his life and his work here in the United States. I would like to thank Dr. Gandhi for speaking today and for being one of our panelists at the Churchill Library last year. We had an event there, and that was during the ESU annual meeting in Washington, DC, which is his hometown. His wife, Panna Naik, is joining us today, a distinguished poet and author of The Astrologer Sparrow. She will review the cocktail recipe with you today, which I have here, and she will share a few of her poems with us. Thank you, Panna. I'd like to turn the program over to Panna and Dr. Gandhi, and thank you for joining us today. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the program. It's a beautiful fall day here. So Josh, take it away. Dr. Gandhi and Panna, thank you.
Thank you. We are very grateful to Karen Blair and Josh Capel for organizing this ESU conversation for us. We also want to thank Heather McCabe, who introduced us to English Speaking Union in the first place. Only last evening, Panna and I were watching a Churchill documentary called Walking with Destiny. We realized how Winston Churchill masterfully used English language to arouse and sustain the morale of British people. So we are pleased to be speaking to the English Speaking Union this afternoon, and also to emphasize how English as a language contributed to our intellectual and professional development. Let me now introduce Panna for her presentation, after which I will speak. Panna Naik is a distinguished Indian poet writing in Gujarati, which is a language native to both of us. And it was also the language native to Mahatma Gandhi, the other Gandhi. Panna has been active on Gujarati literary front for about 4 decades and has established herself as a major writer. She has written several volumes of path-making poetry and short stories, and has given a distinct voice to Indian women, as evidenced by her worldwide following. Her poetry has been amply recognized and awarded by Gujarati literary establishment, both in India and here. Recently, she published The Astrologer's Sparrow, a volume of poetry in English, and here it is. In addition, she has also done pioneering work in the teaching of Gujarati language and taught second-generation students for years in her capacity as adjunct professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Quite interesting issue about Panna is that even though now she is an established major poet in Gujarati language, but all her work, all her creative writing has been done only after she came to America. So my first question to Panna is, how is it that even though you studied Gujarati language and literature in Mumbai, India, you didn't write a single word there, and only after coming to this country, you started writing, and as I just pointed out, published about 11 volumes of Gujarati poetry and short stories as well. Panna?
First, let me thank Karen and Josh for arranging this meeting, and to you for your kind introduction. Yes, it was true that I never wrote poetry, though I wanted to be a poet in India. I went to college and majored in the literature, and my family was well connected with the literary circle. And somehow I wanted to be a poet, and I never wrote anything till I came to the United States. And why is it so? I was wondering, because the one answer that comes to my mind is, in India, it's a male-dominated society. You don't feel free to write, to say anything that you want to, and you don't have I did have at least a role model, which I did find while working at the University of Pennsylvania. I accidentally met Anne Sexton of Boston, and she's a great poet. She was a great poet. She still continues to be a legendary name. So she inspired me to write. She gave me the inspiration and freedom to write without inhibition. So that's the story of how I started writing and what I started writing. And I saw a lot of women around me who were sort of suppressed and repressed, and their feelings were never ever expressed. Because till I started writing, all their feelings, all women's feelings were expressed by men. And how we feel, they could never experience, they could never explain. So a woman's feeling is always expressed by a woman. And I did that, started writing. So I have published 10 volumes of poetry in Gujarati, the language, one of the major languages of India. And it is spoken by about 50 million people in Northwest India. And as Nat pointed out, Mahatma Gandhi wrote his autobiography in Gujarati, and then it was translated into English. After writing all this poetry in Gujarati, I started venturing to write in English, and with quite a struggle, I have mastered the language, and you will be the judge. So I've written poems about nature, my mother, man-woman relationships, of women's innermost feelings, and above all, my immigrant experiences in the United States. And I talk about it all the time, that the first experience And the first incident that comes to my mind is about when I came to the United States. I landed at JFK wearing a sari and the bindi and the whole Indian outfit. And I was standing in a line to get my passport stamped. Behind me was a woman with a child. And the child was staring at me. And after a while, he told his mother, "Oh, mommy, see, her forehead is bleeding," pointing at my bindi. So that's when I realized that I'm a woman and a foreigner. So, I mean, I have woven this incident and many other immigrant experiences in my poems. So I will begin with a immigrant experience. The poem is called Cat. You can stroke my neck with fingers now. I will not growl. I have become a tamed animal. No need to worry, I may be dangerous. See, the pet licks your hand, your cheek, your nose, and she rolls over at your feet. Don't you feel the touch of her soft hair? My needs are few. A little milk, a small corner in your mansion. You are a man, and I am a little harmless cat. You can lift and throw me in the air. I won't scratch you with my claws. Here, put your hand on my neck and mouth. Cup my soft muzzle. See, I'm a tamed cat. But you don't want to. You don't want me as a pet. I know you want to let me loose somewhere in the acacia forest. I also know why. It's because I refuse to meet your demand. You want a cat that never meows. Oh, naivete, no such creature exists. You seek mythology. So that's about my feminist approach. And here is another poem called Family Portrait. After a long time, I came across my family portrait, breathing life into 2 decades, 3 generations. How my father stands out, a man reflecting Gandhi's times. And my mother, docile, head covered, a proper Gujarati lady, despite those modern days of Bombay. Brothers with their wives and children, and I among them, neither there nor here. The glaring sun squinting everyone's eyes has entered the photograph. And peeping in are the flowers sure to stay fresh as long as the portrait lives. In the background, the house with some peeling plaster looks a little old, a little new. I put away the picture. Many thoughts cross my mind. In the flash of a lighted match, darkness clears for a moment, and one sees things as they are. And yet, how short-lived is the season of memory. And I will end with a poem called My Poetry, My Planet. It's essentially Panna's poetry. My poetry, my planet. It bears my strength, betrays my weakness, my face without any makeup, the core of my thought, truth captured in my eyes, transparency of glass, lava of my emotions, the voice for repressed women's suppressed feelings, a nudge to snug society, the planet's blueness, the fragrance of the world's flowers, the landscape of butterflies, greatness of friendship, fulfillment of love, no bitterness, no yesterdays, no tomorrows, no desire to leave any imprint, just seizing the moment, my poetry, my planet. Thank you. And now, turning to Dr. Gandhi. Natwar Gandhi retired in January 2014 from his long tenured position at the District of Columbia's Independent Chief Financial Officer, CFO, where he was appointed in year 2000. In his CFO's capacity, Gandhi was responsible for Washington, D.C.'s finances, including its approximately $12 billion in annual operating and capital funds. During Gandhi's tenure as CFO, the district was transformed from a deficit with $550 million negative fund balance into a financially healthy municipality. When he left in 2013, the fund balance was $1.5 billion. Gandhi was a distinguished policy fellow at Georgetown University's Business School. And now he consults with the World Bank in its efforts to create sustainable cities around the world. Many of you don't know, with his accounting expertise, he's also a very good poet and a writer. Dr. Gandhi.
Thank you, Panna. One should always have one's wife introduce oneself. All good things to say. There are many other things to say, but she's not going to say. Thank you. I published a book. It's a kind of a Washington memoir called Still the Promised Land. It is a saga of an immigrant in nation's capital. There are two issues that I want to talk about today and to relate them to my life story. First is immigration, and the second is diversity of the United States. I contend that both of these are distinguishing characteristics of our country and our peculiar strengths. First, let us talk about immigration. As you can see, I'm an immigrant, and with a name like Gandhi, you can also see that I'm from India. When I came to this country in 1965, I had only $7 on me. That was it, just $7. I was among the tired and poor and wretched that Emma Lazarus wrote about it in that famous poem inscribed on the wall of Statue of Liberty. The point that I'm trying to make here is this. From that humble beginning, I rose to be the chief financial officer of the nation's capital and played a key role in salvaging Washington, D.C. from financial ruin. When I joined the city in 1997, it had roughly $535 million deficit in its fund balance, meaning its saving account was that much in red, as Panna just pointed out. When I retired as its longest serving CFO in late 2013, the district had about $1.5 billion surplus in that saving account. Presently, that balance obviously had to be reduced because of the coronavirus issues. The city's bond ratings that were once considered junk are presently rated as AAA. All this would not have been possible without the visionary leadership of its mayor, Mayor Anthony Williams, and the control board that was appointed to provide oversight over city's financing and the city's council. Imagine this, I'm an Asian immigrant with an accent, and as a CFO, I was the financial czar of the nation's capital. Only in America. America gave me a chance to remake my life that would have been vested in India. Let me tell you a little about that life. I grew up in an extended family that included my parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and siblings. In addition to these 14 people, there were several others who would come and go. It was in a primitive little village in Western India that had no running water. I still remember my mother and sisters carrying drinking water from the town river. No electricity. I studied under the kerosene lamp. No paved roads, no telephone. Dirt and filth everywhere. Dogs and cows roamed streets. There were no cars. There was also a train that would come every day, often late. When I was 17, my father put me on that train to go to work in Mumbai and make some money and send it to him. I was a failure in Mumbai and could not find a good enough job to make a living or afford a housing. I had to send my newly wedded bride to our hometown to live with my parents. I ate at a community kitchen and slept in the place where I worked. When my wife came to Mumbai to live with me, we had no housing. We moved from place to place every 3 months, not knowing where we would go next. It was a nomadic, miserable existence. Seeing no hope, I thought my only salvation was to go to America. But thinking of going to America and actually going there were two different things. One needs a lot of money to go to America. I had no money, of course, but a college friend who had already gone to America took pity on me. He arranged a scholarship and, wonder of wonders, also an airline ticket through an educational foundation. Those were the glory days of America's higher education. In essence, my coming to America was nothing short of a miracle. Life in India, particularly in Mumbai, was horrendous and hopeless. But I was extraordinarily lucky. I was able to come to America and make something of myself. In return, I hope, I have become a productive and a contributing citizen. But in this, I'm not alone. There are hundreds of thousands of Indian immigrants like me. They possess a dazzling array of professional skills and an abundance of entrepreneurial zeal. They are among the most highly educated minorities in America. 70% of Indian Americans are college educated. With this level of education, they can be found excelling in every field from accounting to zoology and everything in between. It is hard to find a hospital without an Indian doctor, an engineering firm without an Indian engineer, a university without an Indian professor, a highway without an Indian-run motel, or a town without an Indian store. One can seldom open a professional journal without seeing an article written by an Indian. Presently, one can hardly watch TV news without an Indian doctor or medical researcher explaining the coronavirus and its effect. Several major American corporations, Google, Microsoft, IBM, MasterCard, Adobe, and Harman among them, currently have Indian American CEOs. Given all this, I firmly believe that a continuous and judicious flow of immigration is good for the country. Particularly, more working age younger immigrants are needed. America is about to face a massive aging crisis. 10,000 baby boomers retire each day. The quality of life of this aging, shrinking population increasingly depends on two factors: sustained high fertility amongst the minority groups already in the country and continued immigration. What is more, if the US is to maintain its competitive edge, it will have to let in more highly skilled immigrants. Similarly, at the other end of the skill spectrum, The US needs immigrants to work in fields, farms, factories, restaurants, and construction where there is an acute shortage of people willing to work long hours in difficult conditions. Only immigrants would do that kind of hard labor. Some fear that too many third world immigrants put American democracy in danger. It should be noted, however, that approximately 150 years ago, the same warnings were heard about Jews, Italians, and Poles who were arriving on American shores by the millions. Even at the founding of the Republic, Benjamin Franklin had raised similar concern about German immigrants. Presently, 43 million immigrants who are mostly from Asia, Africa, and Latin America constitutes nearly 13% of the US population. With their US-born children in equal numbers, they constitute nearly a quarter of the total population. Thus, the country has already moved forward, and the demographic reality is that America will be a majority Hispanic country within a short few decades. Yes, assimilation of first-generation immigrants, no matter where they come from, is nearly always difficult. But for their second and third generations and beyond, Americanization is a foregone conclusion. The melting pot works. I see this firsthand in my own family. My children and grandchildren are American first, Indian second. They have more in common with their American friends next door than with their cousins in India. Yes, they do not look like Americans of European descent, but their values and concepts of liberty, manners, and mores are the same as those of Americans who trace their ancestry to Europe. For an immigrant with skills, America is heaven. If you know what you want to do with your life and are willing to work at it, America is the place to go. Only in America can an Asian immigrant like me become the chief financial officer of the nation's capital. These nation's generous people open their hearts and doors to immigrants like me and let them pursue their dreams. And that is why America is still the most favorite destination for tens of millions around the world. The best and the brightest, as well as the tired and the poor, come to America, invited or not. My story is both cautionary and instructive, difficult yet uplifting. Ultimately, it is a harrowing tale of how to survive in India and succeed in America. It was an uncertain beginning, in some ways even more difficult than immigrants face today. In this winter of American discontent, when a presidential candidate rode into the White House with his anti-immigrant rant, it is rather quaint to say, as I do, America is still the promised land. In singing America's glory, I'm not ignoring what is bad and ugly here. Guns, violence, crime, drugs, social promiscuity, homelessness, racial discrimination, vast economic disparity, erosion of the middle class, and above all, its highly polarized politics, and some of which we saw last night in the debate. And yes, I too feel the sting of discrimination. Crank calls from crazies telling me to go back home. But where would I go? After being here for more than 50 years, this is my home, now and forever. Most Americans take their country for granted. I don't. I know better. I am from the old world, where America is still the place to go. I'm a citizen now and celebrate July 4th. But the day of my biggest celebration is October 10th. On that day in 1965, I landed in America. that is my Independence Day. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for that presentation. I'm now going to invite everyone, if you have questions, please input them into the chat. We already have one that's shown up, but before I get to that, I'm going to ask Karen Blair Brand actually, I think she has both of your books and she just wants to show them off to everyone. Karen, you're live if you want to show everyone the books at this point.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Dr. Gandhi and Panna for sharing their lives with us. Here's Panna's book, The Astrologer Sparrow, her poems, and Dr. Gandhi's Still the Promised Land. So thank you very much. And Josh, take it away.
All right, so our first question comes from Clark Goodwin of the Atlanta branch. Clark asks, will you share your opinion of statehood for the District of Columbia?
Not a good news, not good news. I think it is highly unlikely that district would become a state, at least in my lifetime. Josh and Karen, you are young, so it could happen in your lifetime, but not in my lifetime. The primary reason is nothing but politics. By having district as a state, there would immediately 2 additional senators in the US Senate, and both of them are likely to be Democrats. Now, as we can see, every seat in the US Senate is bitterly contested, and major legislation, major confirmation of the US Supreme Court nominations are basically decided by a voter too. So I don't see district being a state, even though it has more population than, say, Wyoming or Rhode Island, and its budget is larger than many, many states. Yet, the so-called no taxation without representation is violated every day. And we who live in the district basically have no right, no representation in the US Congress. So my sad conclusion is that I don't see that happening anytime soon.
So another question that we have from Heather McCabe, who I think you both are familiar with, asking, Dr. Gandhi, what was the highlight of your tenure as the Chief Financial Officer of the District of Columbia? And Panna, this is a 2-part question, how do you get your inspiration for your beautiful thoughts and words in your poetry?
How do I go? How do I say it? A lot of thoughts come to my mind, and I jot down the points and work with the language and struggle with the words. And I work especially with the images. And it is very hard to, I don't want to say in let's say, I love you, but I want to use an image to express that feeling. So I look for an image from nature, from some conversation, something like that, and then work with the language. And you be the judge of my poetry. What else can I say?
Excellent. So I'll just restate the question, Dr. Gandhi, again. So what was the highlight of your tenure as the Chief Financial Officer of the District of Columbia?
Yes, thank you, Heather, for asking that question. For many others who do not know Heather, we worked together. We were colleagues in the district government, and she was a very valuable resource for me, a national expert on healthcare issues, particularly in Medicare. So I would say the highlight is For those of us who do not know, Washington, D.C. Was nearly bankrupt in mid-90s, as I have pointed out in my presentation. You know, people were leaving the city. The roads were not properly maintained. Situation was quite bad. But more than anything else, it had no cash. So at that time, Congress appointed a control board to watch over the city's finances, actually took over the control of city's finances from the mayor and the council, the elected people. And within that control board, they appointed an independent chief financial officer who is in charge of the entire budget of the city. Nothing in the finances can be determined without the CFO's approval. And this is to make sure that the city becomes a financially viable city and remains so. The first independent chief financial officer, Tony Williams, a distinguished mayor. So after he was a very successful CFO, he became the mayor, and eventually I became the CFO. He was the one who hired me to run city's taxes. Now, obviously, even the limited democracy we had, the so-called home rule, was taken away by Congress. However, city can get back its home rule only after it shows that it manages finances. How do you show that? Well, you have to come up with 4 consecutively balanced budget with a clean audit opinion from an established CPA firm, and that it has enough cash to carry on, that it would meet all its cash needs on a regular basis. So during my tenure, we were able to finish that 4-year period. And it was a great professional honor for me to be able to go to the mayor and to the Congress and to the control board. The city has now balanced its budget for 4 consecutive years, and it has enough financial viability. Our credit ratings are improved. We have enough cash balance to carry on, and that we are financially stable and viable. So that was, in my mind, the most important professional event highlight of my career in the district, but also my entire professional career. Here I was an immigrant responsible for city's finances, and was able to bring back, with the help of the mayor, city's home rule back to where it belongs with the district citizens. Thank you, Heather, for asking that question.
All right, so we have another question from Philip Keyville of Charlottesville, Virginia, who actually has a request for Panna, asking, could you please read one of your poems in Gujarati?
Oh, sure. It's called In the Living Room in Gujarati, Diwan Khana Ma. દિવાન ખાનાને વ્યવસ્થિત કરું છું ઘડી અહીં ઘડી તઈ વિવિધ ફેરફારથી વસ્તુનું મન પૂછી પૂછી ગોઠવણી કરું છું. સોફા અને લેમ્પને નવું સ્થાન આપ્યું, બારીના પડદા બદલી કાઢ્યા, જૂના ગાલીચાની જગ્યાએ નખાવી દીધી વોલ ટુ વોલ કાર્પેટ. સુશોભનને પ્રસન્ન થાય છે દિવાનખાનું, પણ બધું બરાબર થાય છે ત્યારે જ છટકે છે મારું મન. આ બધામાં મને ક્યાં ગોઠવું? કેન્દ્ર શોધું છું જ્યાં હું સરખું બેસી શકું, પણ બારી કનેથી રસ્તો નિહાળતી હું તો ઊભી જ રહું છું, ઊભી જ રહું છું, ઊભી જ રહું છું. So this is about the living room. As I said before, I try to use an image in my poem. I don't want to say I don't fit in this in my house or in the society or in this relationship. So I used this image of a living room where I would ask each piece of the furniture where it would like to be placed. And when everything is in its place, I begin to wonder, where would I place myself? So either I cannot fit in or I don't know how to fit in. And so that's the gist of my poem, to say I don't fit in or I don't know how to fit in. So that's my Gujarati poem called Diwan Khanama, in the living room. Thank you.
So a question from Donald Patillo of the Atlanta branch, who asks, Dr. Gandhi, did you say you landed in Atlanta in 1965?
No, in New York. But then from New York to Atlanta, yes.
I'm sure he'll have a follow-up for that. Also, we do have some people who are sending things that aren't questions, but I just want to read them out. So Stephanie Hillard from Sandhills Pinehurst says, I'm so looking forward to reading more of your published works. Having read other novels, poetry, and enjoyed movies, documentaries, I think I've seen the sensate soul of India. What a gift of immigration to the United States for the excellence of honest, valid, and important work that enriches our life. Additionally, I think a friend, Joshua Gallo, says to everyone, hello everyone, greetings from Italy. I've been friends with Nat for many years now, and it's somewhat ironic that it took a global lockdown for me to meet his wonderful wife. She clearly is Nat's promised land. That's a sweet message from Joshua Gallo.
Yeah, may I take this opportunity to greet Joshua Gallo. Joshua has made a very significant contribution towards financial viability of cities in developing countries. And it was my great honor to go with Joshua on World Bank missions in several countries where we work with the local, municipal, and subnational government officials to examine finances of their particular cities or state and see how they can be improved better.
All right, and finally, I have a question from Joanne Bowdown Ansley. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. This is the last one that we currently have. Is Panna, do you have one or more cats? I think this is in reference to the cat poem that you read earlier. But yes.
I didn't get the question.
I'm sorry.
Do you have one or more cats?
One or more?
One or more?
Cats.
Text.
Cats. The feline, the cat.
Oh, cat.
Oh, no. I use that as an image. I don't use cats. But that was a metaphor. That people, male men, especially Indian men, you're an exception, they don't like women to be, I mean, they want women to be seen, not heard. They should keep their mouth shut. So that's what it is. So women, the cat should not meow.
So Joshua, this is not the woman who keeps her mouth shut.
But you give me freedom to speak.
So I think we have another question in from Clark Goodwin, also of Atlanta, who'd like to know, what did you do while in Atlanta?
I actually came as a student at Atlanta University. And when I came, I had no idea that Atlanta University is a historically Black university. So you can see my image of America, was basically a white country, because image was made from Hollywood movies. I used to adore Alfred Hitchcock's movies, Vertigo, North by Northwest, Rear Window, in which practically Blacks were not seen at all, or very, minor role occasionally. So you can imagine the shock I had experienced when I came to Atlanta and first time went to university to register myself. And all I could see was nothing but black faces. So it was an experience for me, but it proved to be a very useful experience because when then I got a PhD and I taught at University of Pittsburgh and then came to Washington. And in Washington, I became the CFO of Washington, D.C. Before that, a tax commissioner. I spent roughly 20 years in Washington, D.C. government, where the majority of the employees that I had were primarily Black. And so my experience in Atlanta educated me of the issues of racial discrimination. And it also enlightened me, actually awakened me to the discrimination that we have in India of untouchables. A major problem in India, and still is, even though it is illegal and all that. But while in India, I never thought about that. Only in retrospect, after having been here and living among Blacks at Atlanta University, educated me as to what we were doing to untouchables in India. So it was a very moving and learning experience for me, a very beneficial experience.
So there is actually a follow-up that I think you've somewhat answered, but I'm going to just dictate that as well, which is congratulations to both Panna and Nat on these lovely literary contributions. Nat, could you please describe your academic path in a historically Black college or university and how those experiences contributed to your success in DC?
Well, as I say, that I never had a problem of so-called racial discrimination, even though majority of my staff, 1,200 people under me as a CFO in Washington, D.C., were Blacks. I was also appointed, and I was a CFO for 13 years by 3 successive Black mayors. And most of the city officials that I worked with were primarily Blacks. So all the, erroneous notion people have about Blacks, I did not, because I was educated and learned a lot at Atlanta University. Then I also taught at a Black school, North Carolina A&T in Greensboro, North Carolina, where in the early 60s, there were lunch counter protests at Woolworth department store. So I learned from that as well. So in that respect, it was very beneficial for me, and it prepared me for my work in the district government. And I got along famously well. And I had among the best, the Black public officials that I can find. I had a pleasure to work with them.
Excellent. Well, I think that will conclude the question and answer portion of our session today. I'm going to now invite our Executive Director of the English Speaking Union, Karen Karpovich, to say a few words and close us out here today. I think Karen is joining now.
Thank you so much, Professor Gandhi, and your lovely wife. The poetry was beautiful. Thank you so much. I want to thank Karen Blair Brand for making this happen. I think it was a wonderful way to finalize our first 6 very successful happy hours, which is our first series. And again, as I mentioned in the past, these are totally curated by our branches. And we've had an amazing, amazing registration and an amazing kind of response to these programs. And they will continue. And they are a new series is being prepared, so stay tuned. But in the meantime, next week on October the 7th, we will be doing a Wrench speaker at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's going to be a tour of Shakespeare's London. And I know we're all kind of homebound, so we're going to take some time and we're going to go on a tour of Shakespeare's London. So I do hope that as many of you as possible register for that at 6 p.m. on October 7th. And the week of October the 19th, which is when we first met Professor Gandhi, it was a year ago in Washington, D.C., that he spoke at our annual general meeting. And here it is again. And this year we were supposed to be in New York, and unfortunately we're going to be virtual. But I do hope that as many of you as possible register for our conference, which starts on October the 19th. And we have some amazing speakers and some amazing events, including a branch breakout sessions, so that you can get together and deal with issues of branch leadership and the branches going forward. But also our keystone event is really the gala on October the 21st at 6 o'clock. And our guest of honor will be the Princess Royal, who will be addressing us. And we do hope that you can join us. Additionally, there will be a concert by our president, Dr. Quinn Pieper. He's going to be performing Rhapsody in Blue, which is homage to the English-speaking Union, which was founded in New York in 1920. So that's a celebration of the jazz age in New York, and also the celebration of the founding of the English-speaking Union. And we'll also be giving out the Princess Royal Award, which was established by the British Cabinet for our 100th anniversary. So we have some amazing honorees. So please join us on either October the 7th for our tour of London, Shakespeare's London, or try to join us for, if not all, some of the events on October the 19th. I thank you again, and I thank the Happy Hour Committee for an amazing series of events.
May I add a word before you go away?
Sure.
I just want to point out as to how English as a language was critical to our intellectual and professional developments. More on a practical side, the one reason why the Indian immigrants are doing so extraordinarily well, even in the first generation, is because of their English proficiency. Had we not been English proficient, then life would have been far more difficult in America. So this, in addition to the glorious literature that we enjoy in English language, and I mentioned in my opening the speeches of Winston Churchill, one of the great glories of English language. In addition to that great heritage, there is a practical aspect of English in our lives as to how well we are able to settle down. So I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to be with the English-speaking Union. And let's hope that we get together again in person.
Yes. Well, I just wanted to tell you one story, because it's also our international council. And you know that the English-speaking Union also it's the English-speaking Union of Commonwealth. And a year ago, I had the opportunity of being in St. Petersburg, Russia, with Karen and also with Bonnie at our international conference. And I met the head of the English-speaking Union of India.
Oh.
And he said to me very happily, India is the largest English-speaking language in the world.
Yes.
And he said that with a lot of pride. So that was kind of an interesting way to end our discussion. And thank you again.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
In person.
Thank you all
Okay.
also. Thank you, Karen, for everything you help us with.
Okay, thank you. And have a wonderful afternoon, and I'll see you soon, hopefully at the Shakespeare
Yes.
Thank you.
Tour of London. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.